My son got his teacher pregnant, and he denied it. Now she's demanding marriage or child support, but the DNA test results shocked everyone. I know it's unusual to spill family drama online, but I really need some perspective on the craziest situation I've ever faced. I run a few restaurants in my city, nothing fancy on a national scale, but enough to say my family is decently well off. I'm not some tech mogul or engineer, just a business guy who found a niche in the food industry. My life was stable for the most part. I have a 19-year-old son in his first year of college. He's a chill kid, pretty shy, especially around older women, and he's never been the type to chase trouble. But somehow, trouble found him in the worst possible way. It started about a month ago. My son came home looking pale and jittery. He'd normally just say hi and crash in his room, but that day he was visibly on edge. Later that evening, I heard him in a heated phone call whispering things like, "I don't know what you're talking about. And I'm not the father." That was enough to make my heart thump hard. I confronted him, and at first, he dodged my questions, but eventually he came clean. A former high school teacher had contacted him claiming she was pregnant with his baby and demanding either marriage or child support. To say I was shocked would be an understatement. My son insisted it was all nonsense, that he never slept with her or even been alone with her. I believe my kid. He's honest to a fault, and definitely not the type to hook up with someone nearly a decade older, let alone a teacher. Still, hearing the word pregnant in connection with my teenager rattled me. I asked him if there was even a chance he'd done something stupid after turning 18, maybe at a party. He swore up and down, "Dad, no. It never happened." The teacher in question had subbed at his high school for a short stretch during his senior year, so the timing alone was suspicious. Plus, she was older, probably late 20s or early 30s, which made the whole scenario feel surreal. A few days later, this teacher, let's just call her teacher, showed up at our front gate. It was a Saturday morning, and I was in the kitchen sorting out restaurant receipts. My son was asleep upstairs. The doorbell rang, and there she stood, arms crossed and wearing a furious expression. She demanded to speak to my son. I politely told her to calm down and explain what she wanted. She basically burst into a rant about how my son had ruined her life, and that we had to man up and take responsibility. Then she threw out this insane demand that my son either marry her or pay a large sum in monthly support. The marriage bit floored me. It was like some twisted soap opera. I kept my cool and asked her to sit down and explain everything. She refused, just paced around my living room throwing accusations at my son's character and calling me a liar when I said I needed proof. She claimed they had a secret relationship after he turned 18, which she framed as fully consensual, but if that were true, she'd be in trouble for hooking up with a student under her supervision. So why was she acting so brazen? The whole thing smelled like a scam. Still, I told her if she's sure my son's the father, we'll do a paternity test. She shot back that she wouldn't trust any test I arranged, accusing me of being wealthy enough to buy off the lab technicians. The paranoia in her eyes was unreal. She threatened that if we didn't cooperate, she'd take us to court, go public with the story, and ruin my son's reputation. She framed it like we had no other choice but to cave in and do everything she wanted. As soon as she stormed out of my house, I got on the phone with a lawyer I knew. He said we should absolutely demand a DNA test and keep records of every interaction we had with teacher from now on. Legal battles can get messy, but we needed to protect ourselves. My wife, my son's mother, was livid when she found out. She's usually the level-headed one, but was ready to show up at teacher's door and unleash hell. I managed to calm her down by explaining we needed to do this by the book. Meanwhile, teacher kept blowing up my phone with messages alternating between demands and threats. Sometimes she acted like we could solve it amicably if I just paid her off. Other times she insisted she wanted a wedding immediately, as if that made any sense. She said she was around 5 months pregnant, which made her timeline even weirder. She claimed the baby was definitely my son's, but her story about when they supposedly hooked up kept shifting. At this point, my biggest worry was that the courts might take her claims seriously without a test, or that she'd spread rumors before we could clear my son's name. He was just starting college. A scandal like this could mess up his future. I could already imagine the whispers on campus. "That's the dude who got his teacher pregnant." It made me sick. I contacted the principal of my son's former high school, someone I'd done business with before, and explained this bizarre situation while asking for any documentation on teacher's schedule when she subbed there. He agreed to help by providing official records showing which classes she actually covered and when. It turns out she barely taught at that school, maybe 6 weeks total, and from those logs, she was never even assigned to my son's classes. That was a relief but didn't completely rule out the possibility of an after-school encounter, which is what she was claiming. Digging deeper, my son's friend came forward saying there was no way my son hooked up with her. During the weekend she insisted the affair happened because he was out of town at a soccer tournament. My son was a pretty decent midfielder back in high school. There were photos, social media tags, and all sorts of evidence placing him in another state at that time. The more we pieced together, the more obvious it became that her story was full of holes. After some intense back and forth through our respective lawyers, we managed to schedule a paternity test. My lawyer insisted on using a reputable lab selected through the court to avoid any bribery nonsense. Teacher kept complaining about it, still dropping hints that a big fat check could make everything go away. I refused. My son started looking haunted by the whole ordeal, dark circles under his eyes, constant checking of his phone. It killed me to see him so stressed out. But I told him we're going to fight this, and we'll prove you're innocent. He nodded, looking both scared and relieved as we got to the lab on Thursday morning. Teacher was already there, arms folded, glaring daggers at my son. She refused to even speak to him, just kept muttering about how she was the victim. The nurses took samples from both of them, then we had to wait 1 or 2 weeks for the results. That waiting period felt like an eternity. My son tried to keep busy with school and his part-time shifts at my restaurant, but I could see worry on his face as he kept asking me, "Dad, you believe me, right?" I'd reassure him every time, "Yes. 100%. Teacher didn't let up. She texted or called daily with new threats, saying she'd tell local news stations about how we were covering up a scandal. She even threatened to stand outside my restaurant with a sign reading, "Deadbeat Dad." The gall of this woman was unbelievable. I saved every message and gave them to my lawyer. He was practically salivating over how strong our defamation case was becoming. Then one random evening I got a call from an unknown number. A man's voice started yelling, "Stop destroying teacher's life. You'll regret it if you don't pay up." When I asked who the hell he was, he just cursed at me and hung up. It didn't scare me, but it pissed me off. She was clearly trying to recruit random people to put more pressure on us. My wife wanted to file a police report immediately, but my lawyer suggested waiting until paternity results came in, so we could have solid grounds for pressing charges, for harassment, or extortion. Final update: my son got his teacher pregnant, and he denied it. Now she's demanding marriage or child support, but the DNA test results shocked everyone. The day arrived to pick up the DNA test results. My lawyer, my son, and I headed to the clinic. They handed us a sealed envelope, and I practically tore it open on the spot. The moment I saw 0% probability of paternity, my entire body flooded with relief. My son wasn't the father. All the stress, fear, and anger of those past weeks suddenly had nowhere to go. I looked at my kid, who gave a weird half laugh and then slumped in his chair like he was about to pass out. The teacher was nowhere to be seen that day. She left the clinic after her part was done. We took those results home, and my wife burst into tears of joy. She hugged our son tight, almost smothering him. Then her expression changed to fury. She said, "We're going to destroy that woman in court." Right. My lawyer was already drafting notices that we would be pressing defamation and possibly extortion charges if the teacher didn't back off and apologize. I wasn't about to let her slide after the hell she put my family through. We sent a formal cease and desist letter demanding a retraction of her claims and compensation for our legal fees. A week went by with no response. My son tried to move on, focusing on his classes and social life. It was like he finally started breathing again. I saw him laughing with his friends, and even posted a few pictures of them at a concert. But deep down, I was still on edge, waiting for the teacher's next move. Sure enough, one afternoon at my restaurant, she showed up. She'd somehow sneaked in through a side entrance. And before I knew it, she was standing in the hallway near the kitchen, cornering me while I tried to oversee a delivery. She started sobbing and ranting that I'd ruined her life. That the school board suspended her after hearing about her fake allegations, and that she was now fired. She demanded that I fix it like I was responsible for her losing her job. She had the audacity to say if I had just given her a few $1,000s, none of this would have happened. I stared at her in disbelief. She was basically admitting she'd been after money the whole time. I told her she needed to leave, or I'd call the cops. She spat on the floor, literally spit, and stomped out, cursing me under her breath. I immediately filed a police report for harassment and trespassing. I wasn't messing around anymore. This woman was unhinged. A couple of days later, the principal called me back. He confirmed that the teacher had been officially terminated. The investigation revealed she had pulled similar stunts before, though it never escalated to this extent. Hearing that made me furious all over again. How many people had she tried to con before finally getting caught? I told my lawyer I wanted to go full steam ahead with legal action. My wife agreed, saying we had to make sure she couldn't do this to anyone else. My son was hesitant, worried about dragging things out, but he eventually agreed that letting her walk away with no consequences was a bad idea. We prepared to file a lawsuit for defamation, emotional distress, and attempted extortion. My lawyer thought we had a solid case. He warned me that it might take a while to resolve, but we had a mountain of evidence. The DNA test, her threatening texts, phone calls from that random guy, her repeated demands for money, plus statements from the principal. While we waited for the court date, I hired a private investigator to dig deeper into her background. It turns out she was drowning in debt, she had nearly been evicted multiple times, and had even gone to small claims court before over unpaid rent. There were also rumors she tried to pressure another student's family in the past, but it never blew up like this. It was clear she saw my family as a gold mine because of my restaurants, and assumed we'd pay her off. Her arrogance was staggering. About a month later, we had our first hearing. The teacher showed up looking bitter and haggard with a public defender, because she couldn't afford a lawyer. We laid out our evidence in front of the judge, the DNA results, text transcripts, phone logs, and proof that her story was impossible, given my son's schedule, and that soccer tournament trip. She tried to spin some wild excuse saying she'd been pressured by someone else, or that she was misled about the baby's paternity. It was a pathetic display. The judge basically called her out, stating that she had made serious false allegations with zero proof, and even threatened us for money. The teacher broke down saying she was desperate, pregnant, and unemployed. She said something like, "I just wanted them to care about my situation," which only made her look more manipulative. The judge ruled in our favor, ordering her to pay our legal fees, and slapped her with a fine for filing false claims. Whether she'll ever actually pay is another story, but at least we got a formal judgment. She also faced further investigation over her conduct as a teacher, likely ensuring she'd never be allowed near a classroom again. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt a whirlwind of emotions, relief, anger, and triumph. My son was officially cleared of any doubt. The biggest satisfaction was watching the teacher realize she had no leverage left. Her face when the judge scolded her is something I'll never forget. She looked at me like I was the villain for standing up for my kid, but I felt zero sympathy after everything she'd done to us. My son bounced back pretty quickly once it was all over. He said he learned a harsh lesson about how messed up some people can be. He's focusing on his studies again, hanging out with friends, and basically just living his life without the weight of that nightmare. My wife and I took him out to celebrate once the case closed, just a simple family dinner at one of my restaurants. We toasted to our family's unity, and joked that if someone turned this into a movie, critics would say the plot was too over the top. I admit even though we won, there's still some leftover rage in me. She tried to manipulate us with a fake pregnancy claim, demanded marriage, threatened public exposure, and even had random goons calling my phone. It was beyond anything I'd ever imagined dealing with. But we came out on top by staying calm, gathering evidence, and letting the truth speak for itself. I'm thankful we had the resources to fight her in court. Not everyone could afford a decent lawyer or private investigator, and she banked on us being too scared to challenge her, a big mistake on her part. Some people have asked me if we're sure she was ever pregnant. The truth is I have no idea. The private investigator found conflicting medical records. Maybe she's pregnant, maybe she's not. If she is, I feel sorry for that child because having her as a mother would be rough. Either way, it's not my family's problem anymore. We proved my son wasn't responsible. The judge saw through her lies. She lost her teaching job, and she's saddled with legal consequences. For me, that's more than enough closure. My parents, especially my father, were relieved when the DNA results came back. They had stayed mostly in the background trusting I'd handle it, but they were worried sick. My father actually told me, "Son, you did the right thing, you protected your boy." That meant a lot. Sometimes I feel guilty that my son had to go through such a nasty experience at such a young age, but he came out stronger. He witnessed firsthand how important it is to stand your ground when you're being falsely accused. And I guess I've learned that no matter how absurd someone's story might sound, you have to address it head on with facts, otherwise liars can turn your life upside down. In the end, if anyone reading this ever finds themselves in a similar spot accused of something crazy by someone manipulative, my advice is, document everything. Don't let them scare you into paying hush money, or making a bad deal just to avoid public embarrassment. Collect texts, emails, threats, and get a lawyer who knows their stuff. Bullies like that crumble once you shine enough light on their lives. The relief you feel when your name is cleared is worth every bit of stress. So yeah, that's the saga of how my son was falsely accused by a teacher who claimed he got her pregnant. She tried to trap him into marriage or child support. And we had to go through a legal battle to prove his innocence. The DNA test results completely vindicated him, and she ended up losing her job credibility, and faced serious legal repercussions. We've moved on with our lives now, but I still shake my head sometimes thinking, did that really happen? It feels like a twisted dream, but it was real, and it taught us all a lesson in standing up for ourselves. My son's back to normal, focusing on a future that was almost derailed by someone's greed. In the grand scheme of things, I'm just glad we made it out with our family intact, and our heads held high.